good afternoon and good evening to all of you. We thank you very much for joining the GRASP webinar series. This is a continuing monthly webinar series. Hopefully some of you, maybe many of you, have dialed into a previous series within our webinar program. Our last one was with Eric Mueller and Dave Lucas, as you may know, the two founders and owners within GRASP. Today, we are very happy to be speaking with two very esteemed travel managers here in the United States. And we'll be speaking to them about a variety of things that are related to the opportunities to grow and better possibly manage a travel program during the pandemic that we're facing, and as travel is beginning to return. And we're certainly seeing that through our systems here at GRASP and talking with our customers and with our prospects, and hopefully you all are seeing that as well. My name is Rick George. I'm Senior Vice President of Global Enterprise Sales. It's a long title, but what it means is I head up the division that sells our corporate solution into primarily Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies. Joining me from GRASP is my marketing colleague, Peter Sibio. And Peter will be logging questions that you may have during our time together. If you would, please type them into the chat box. And as we approach the end of Fran and Mike's comments, we'll certainly leave time for questions. So I would like to introduce, gives me great pleasure, two good friends of GRASP, both GRASP clients that are joining us. First, Fran McClarnon. Fran is Vice President of Global Travel and Corporate Credit Card Services for Interpublic Group. And Mike Hall, who is Senior Manager of Global Travel for Illumina. And I thank you both very, very much for joining us. Peter, if you would be kind enough to pull up a short slide presentation that we wanted to share with all of you before we get into questions for Fran and Mike. So a couple of weeks ago, via LinkedIn and via our GRASP technology site on LinkedIn, we posted a series of questions, and we were really, really pleased that we had extraordinary response over the 3 or 4 days that it was out there. In terms of travel managers, procurement professionals, some travel agencies that responded to it as well. So I just wanted to run through these real quickly. We will make this available for anyone on the call that would like to review this. And there will also be video of our presentation today that we'll make available for all of you after we conclude today. So first of all, the first question was basically around security, and knowing that you are on either a proprietary or non-proprietary platform with the various vendors that you work with. And here at GRASP, the majority of the companies that we work with on the corporate side, for a variety of different reasons, it could be GDPR compliance, it could be PCI compliance, it could be the information security group within your companies, are really demanding a dedicated server environment. And this is something that we strongly recommend if you're considering GRASP, and certainly for our European clients. And it looks by the responses that most that responded to the question certainly agree to that as well. Peter, would you move on to the next slide, please? One of the things that we have seen in the 25 years that we've been in business, serving corporations, travel management companies, financial services companies, is really to have not only a variety of reporting options for you to choose from as travel professionals, but also to be able to have a lot of ability to drill into your data, to be able to slice and dice it, look at it in different layers, different lenses, if you will. And so the question was, is this important, whether you are segmented by department level, cost center, business unit, however you are set up as an organization. And again, the vast majority of the responses really believe that that was important. Whether you're looking at internal metrics measurement, key performance indicators within your various divisions or business units. It's something that is one of our core competencies at GRASP around mapping hierarchies and in very complex hierarchies. And it seems like that was quite important to those that responded. Peter, next slide, please. True cost of trip. I remember attending the ACTE conference a couple of years ago, and this was really starting to be very much a focal point in terms of looking at a trip and the life cycle of a trip from when it's initially booked through the trip taking place to ultimately when it's expensed in an expense report. And I think we all know, whether it's domestic or international, there's a lot going on potentially in that trip, or maybe it's a meeting. And this is something that we are seeing very much with our corporate clients, being able to take a look at all of the different data points and all of the metrics. And it was a slam dunk winner for those that responded. Everybody is really needing to understand this, and especially as we come out of COVID, start to return to travel, being able to look at as many data metrics as you can is apparently 100% important to everybody that responded. Peter, next slide, please. Where are my travelers? You know, again, a duty of care, probably happening before COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID, and possibly the ability to work with providers like us, providers like ISOS, other security entities in the industry is obviously very important. Peter, next slide, please. Airline and hotel protocols, cleansing. I think probably all of us have been on webinars with airline executives, with hotel executives, and obviously that is very, very key as we start to return. Peter? Hotel folio. It's kind of the holy grail if you can capture it and if you could bring it in and you could report on it. Seems it's a bit of a mixed response, but it's something that we're continuing to work on very strongly within our company, and you know, certainly other vendors that we work with are as well. I believe the final slide, Peter. That was the final slide. Awesome. So again, if you would be interested, anyone on the call with this information, please let us know, and we're happy to provide you with the slides. So without further ado, I do have some questions that we would like to speak with Fran and with Mike about. And so let me start. Question to both of you, and I'll start with Fran. We're now in what, 5th month, 6th month of the hardcore virus and the shutdowns that we've faced. Has there been at any point, Fran, kind of a aha moment that you know your travel team that work for you have faced around what is happening and, you know, best preparing for the return? Was there something, you know, as you were sitting at your desk, or, you know, maybe having a cup of tea on a weekend, and you thought, oh my heavens, you know, this is unbelievable?
Yeah, I mean, there's been so many aha moments, right? In the over 40 plus years that I've been in this business, I have never seen an industry cripple and come to its knees as quickly as this happened to this industry, all around, hotels, airlines, without any recovery. I mean, some of the other things that we've gone through, like September 11 and SARS, there was a very rapid return. And I think that this is a completely different animal. We've all been put in a position where we've had to furlough staff. We've had to not only furlough, we've had to eliminate staff. We have just been put in a place where we just don't know when things will return. And you look at the reports, you know, we obviously are using GRASP. We look at these reports every day. These are our Bibles to hope and pray that the numbers start to come up. Unfortunately, the aha is, you know, we will be in this position until they get a vaccine. And we just have no idea when things will return. And we've all waited for the summer to pass, and hopefully the fall would be better, and we're all praying for that. But when you go from very, very high volumes to near zero in a day, it's like flipping a switch, and you've got an entire program. My global program is in over 50 countries, and we've got people working throughout this entire universe. And what do I do with them now? What do they do? And how do I handle that? And trying to manage what's going on in our industry with people's personal lives and their children and no insurance if you furlough them. It's been a very, very hard 5 or 6 months for me anyway. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people that share that sentiment.
And Mike, what about you? I know Illumina does a tremendous amount of business in Asia Pacific, and certainly you probably felt the early effects of this before it came into Europe and into the United States. Have you had a aha moment over the past 4 or 5 months?
Yeah, and speaking of that, so I mean, like by the end of January, I was on almost daily calls about COVID-19, mainly because of Asia. But I think one of the aha moments that I had was more about human psychology. You know, we've had video conferencing in place for, 20, 30 years. We've had robust technology on video conferencing that allows us to use it on our laptops for the last decade at least. And yet we haven't really used it. And this has taken us from knowing about the technology to being able to use it on an hourly basis in some cases. And so it tells me that really we have to, it's one thing to put technology out there, it's another thing to experience it. And this has allowed us to experience video, virtual reality, video conferencing, virtual events, all of that technology that already exists, and allows us to innovate and put that technology into use, substituting for where we used to use travel. I mean, obviously very tragic that the travel industry has been hit so hard, but I think that element is really my sort of eureka moment.
Very good, thank you. And so that's a really, really good point, Mike, around virtual meetings and whether you use Teams, whether you use GoToWebinar, whatever you might be using. And so, Fran, obviously you all are using a virtual meeting environment to, probably to a large degree. And so as travel starts to return, and possibly even after vaccines found, that type of thing, do you believe that virtual meetings will be a large presence within an Interpublic Group moving forward, or as travel returns, you're able to fly to your various countries, it will decrease? But what are your thoughts on that?
There's a couple of things that I can say about that. I mean, as far as employees go, we have actually started to look at real estate and where my company's thought process on working virtually was never really a commonplace. It is now very common. For example, my floor and all of my team and the GBT team that I've got are now permanently virtual. So we went from a company that was no virtual working, a non-virtual working environment to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, thousands of people now working virtually. So that's one part of it. And of course, when you're working virtually, you have got to have virtual meetings. I mean, I'm on virtual meetings throughout the day from the morning until the evening. We are having virtual meetings with our vendors. We are having virtual cocktail hours. We're doing all of those virtual cooking classes. We're doing all of that. My business is 50% client, so we could never get to a point where we would be 100% virtual. And our clients are really wondering when we're going to get to see them and when things are going to pick up. So I envision that there will be a lot of virtual communications amongst the IPG employees. And certainly coming back into 2021, I would envision that people will say that if you didn't need to do a lot of traveling in 2020, we probably shouldn't do a lot of traveling in 2021 where it's not billed to a client and where it's not absolutely essential. So we're looking at maybe 2021 when things pick up to go back to, we're hoping at least a 50% return in 2021. And I just don't think things will come back to any degree that it was before March, before 22 or 23.
That may be very true, and certainly from the webinars that I personally have been on, and in my team, that seems to be very much the case. You're 100% correct. Mike, just kind of taking that a step further, and don't want to ask you to give away any proprietary mix within Illumina, but pre-COVID, so maybe this time last year, would you give us a sense of what your percentage was of domestic to international travel? And then also, what do you anticipate it will be maybe this time next year? And again, there's a lot of assumptions, if there's a vaccine found, if there's a vaccine not found, but will there be more travel in the United States that will ramp up before international travel, maybe vice versa? Just kind of interested in your thoughts on that.
Sure, Rick, and this is really sort of based on our North American population. Prior to March, about 30 to 40% of our travel, of our trips, were international, intercontinental trips, I should say. And I would say this time next year, if I see 15%, I'll be surprised. And a lot of that is because I'm assuming that, it's kind of like playing whack-a-mole. As soon as, say, Europe looks good on its COVID infection rate, we'll see somewhere else that's not good. And what we're seeing then is we're seeing the immigration needs change as a result. So every time that we have to move somebody across a border, we have to look continuously at whether there's a quarantine requirement. Do we have to quarantine when they come back? Do we have to get them a PCR test within 3 days of travel? Can we get them a PCR test within 3 days of travel? All of those things, and those complexities make it difficult to travel internationally. And I don't expect, even if we have a vaccine this time next year or a proven therapy, I don't expect it to be universal enough to really wipe out those concerns. So I expect it to be the same, not the same, but pretty similar this time next year. Yeah.
Very good, very good. And so a question to both Fran and Mike, and Fran, I'll start with you, please. As travel starts to return, whenever that may be for the Interpublic Group, what will be or will there be, I guess I should say, will there be one single indicator or maybe several indicators that you and your team and maybe the CEO of your company are really looking for to be able to say, yes, travel is returning, travel is safe? Obviously, vaccine would help greatly, but is there a metric or maybe a series of metrics that you're monitoring and will kind of trigger what you do moving forward?
Yeah, the thing that we're monitoring is are the cases of COVID, the rise in cases, the slowdown of cases. As you go through this every day, the cases are still very high in a lot of states within the United States, and they're still coming up. So I think that's the issue here is that until we get to a stabilized platform here on COVID cases, people are still concerned, and my company will be concerned. And although we are, we've got a COVID unit that you can't travel unless you get approval from this unit of folks. We are approving certain travel programs and certain travel. I think it's, everybody has to sign off on, do you understand the risks and all of this kind of jazz. But I think that it really, my company will probably feel better when the cases go down and when there's an injection to give people. And I don't think anybody's going to feel better until then.
And Mike, what about yourself at Illumina?
Yes, so the thing that Fran was saying, exactly that. We want to see cases go down, and we really, so we have a sort of a red, yellow, green system of looking at that. If it's red, we want travel right now. We have some travel we have to do. We want an SVP to look at that and say, yes, it's essential. If it's yellow, we want suddenly a VP level to say, yes, this is essential travel. If it's green, we can go back fairly close to what we were before, but with higher demand management sort of protocols in place. But one other metric that we're looking at beyond just the infection rate is if we send somebody somewhere, we're also looking to see the percentage of ICU beds that are being used, and also, I mean, really the capacity of hospitals to test, to track, and to treat people. So if we have somebody in a certain state or a certain country that comes down with COVID, we want to know that they can get taken care of if there is an issue. And so we're looking at that too. And we're layering these bits of sort of data onto a system that goes into that determination through MEAS, through our security system, and through our emergency health and safety as to whether a place is red, yellow, or green, and we're defining that. Yeah.
Very interesting. And so that brought a question to mind that around your company's policies on individual employee travel for personal. And I'll start, Mike, maybe with you. Is there such a policy in place where you're discouraging personal travel for employees? Do they need a sign off? Do they need to sign a waiver? Because I know in my wife's company, who is in the travel industry, they have certainly discouraged travel in various areas, hotels and airplanes. So I'm just curious from both of your organizations. Mike?
Yeah, a couple of things. So first of all, yes, we do tell people that if they travel somewhere, they have to follow the same protocols. They have to, you know, if we as a company say until yesterday, you know, CDC expects you to quarantine for 14 days after coming back. We expect the same thing if it's personal travel. And by the way, if it's personal travel and you have to quarantine for 14 days, and if you have to be on site at one of our labs, you're quarantining on your own time. So you got to take that into account. The second thing is we still, you know, we do have policy in place. You have to wear a mask while traveling. We have the same expectations for personal travel. And then we also want people to self-declare if they are traveling somewhere and to check with one of our emergency health and safety people as to whether that place is a high risk or a lower risk. And so we've had you know, I'd say our emergency health and safety have been very busy following up to see where those places are and advising some of our travelers that are going on personal trips. Yeah.
And Fran, what about you and Interpublic Group employees for personal travel?
It's funny because I brought this up before March that people should have to declare when they're going on a personal trip, and I was told, oh no, you can't do that because it's, you know, their personal life. And lo and behold, when they came back to the office, a few of those people brought back COVID to the buildings, and a few people then got it from the person that was personally traveling. So they quickly changed that practice. But then right after that, we were all restricted to working from home. So right now, 100% of my employees are working from home. None of the offices are open. So, you know, if you're going on a personal trip, we ask you to declare it. Let us know that you're going. But when you come back to also, you know, quarantine for 14 days, but they're quarantining in their own home. They're not going back to an office. So as a company, we don't have any obligation, if you will. Obviously, on a personal level, we don't want people to be sick, but they're not coming back and bringing it back to an office. They're coming back to their own homes. And so the requirement would be also, you know, wear a mask, wear gloves, do all of the proper things that you need to do, but they wouldn't be allowed to go back to the office at all. Nobody's allowed right now to do that, but they certainly wouldn't be allowed to go. And once the office buildings do open, there will be set restrictions that if you go on a personal trip, you'd have to quarantine for a certain amount of time and take your own personal time to do that. It would not be company time to do that.
Yeah.
Nobody will do that because they only get a certain amount of vacation time. You'd have to use your own vacation time.
Hey, just curious, and in terms of your company, Fran, is there any target time frame identified for opening offices up, and either here in the United States or any of your international offices?
Yeah, some of our international offices have opened. They open, they close again, you know, because somebody brings in another case. The domestic offices, U.S. offices, were not scheduled to open up until September the 8th. Now they've moved that till January. So none of our offices will officially open until January in hopes that there is a vaccine. But if you need to go into the office, there's a protocol on how you can get an exception to do so. And people will go to the committee that we've got, and you have to get an approval from HR and from the committee in order to be able to go into the office, whether that be once a week, whether that be on a one-term basis, twice a week, whatever it is, you'd have to get approval to do so. And then if you do, then you would certainly have to be mandated. If you go on a personal trip on an airline, you'd have to be able to let us know, and you couldn't come back for 14 days.
Understand, and it's very difficult. It's kind of a moving scale, right? Because we all hope we'll have good news on a vaccine, or more good news on the testing period, proving results for the people that are in the trials. But it really is a wait and see game. And
right, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And it went from September to January very quickly. We were approaching September, and then everybody was, we had some offices that said they weren't going to come back until January, but the corporate office and most of them were saying September, and now it went immediately to January. So, we have no idea if it'll move to June. We just don't know. And then as I said, for the likes of myself and my team and a lot of other people, we won't ever return because our offices are being sublet. Our furniture was all sent home. We've set up offices in our own home, and that will be the permanent way to work.
Big change, because I know in your case, Fran, especially you have a pretty had a pretty lengthy commute from your home into New York City. So
yes,
it's got to be
4 hours round trip each day. And although I don't miss the commute, I do miss the being around people and the collaboration. So,
yeah.
But I'll be able to do that once the office is open. I'll be able to go in whenever I want.
That's great. So it's kind of the best of both environments.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So how do you both look at budgeting for 2021? And I ask this because as my team talks to our current corporate clients, our prospective corporate clients, you ask 4 different travel managers or procurement, and there's almost 4 or maybe 5 different answers on how they approach the coming year, or maybe budgeting for several years. I'm very curious on your response for both of those, budgeting and in terms of dealing with vendor contracts that may be coming up, airline agreements, hotel agreements. We have many clients where they're just extending the agreements with their air carriers, hoteliers, and into 2021 because they really don't know realistically, when they're going to come out of this and when they're going to return. So as much as you're willing or able to share in terms of your philosophy around budgeting for 2021, I believe we'd be most interested to hear. And Fran, maybe I could start with you.
Yeah. Well, my budgets are by country and by region. So as we know, Asia Pacific is doing a lot better than the rest of the world. So as far as travel goes, so we're doing okay in most of our European markets, but budgeting is very hard. You don't know. We don't know if we're going to be back up 30%. We don't know if we're going to be back up 50%. Is it going to be 30% for the first quarter? Is it then going to go to 40%? Will it top 50%? It's just really, it's a guessing game. At this point, we're just guessing. Thankfully, I get an opportunity. I do a 1 RE, a 2 RE, and a 3 RE. So I have an opportunity with each quarter to go back and adjust those numbers. But it's a guessing game. And this year is sort of like we're given a little bit of a pass of what happened with our budgets. But my team and I worked very hard this year with our vendors, with our credit card vendors and the other vendors to make sure that our budgets were close to being where we needed them to be, and that we didn't have a complete loss. But it's very, very challenging. The airline contracts, we are renewing airline contracts, and we're renegotiating contracts as normal. Thank God we don't have any major airline contracts up for renewal. Hotels, hard to do that with hotels when 90% of the people are not working. 90% of the hotels are either closed or the employees are furloughed. So for this year's hotel RFP, likely would be that you'd roll over your current rates or try to negotiate those down a little bit. But it's a very, very tough situation to be in, to be able to budget, because you just, like everything else, it's just a numbers game. You have no idea. Your guess, it's a guess.
Best guesstimate is about
Best guesstimate.
Yeah.
Mike,
And again, as I said, I've got the opportunity to switch it up every quarter if I need to. So.
Yeah, we're looking every quarter too, and we're also looking regionally. So I mean, for example, Greater China domestic travel around 70% for the fourth quarter of this year, probably higher than that, first quarter of next year. Domestic Australia, same thing, we're looking very positively. Regional Europe, same thing, we're looking probably 40-50%. Transatlantic from Europe, almost nothing through the first quarter of next year. Domestic North America, we are holding. We're basically holding an almost zero budgets for the fourth quarter of this year, and we're really still looking at first quarter of next year saying, what are we going to do? We're not sure how we're going to hold those budgets. We may be more surgical and say our commercial team needs to have them, sort of say 70%, but the rest much lower than that. And so also looking at, most of our hotels we've already rolled over for 2021, and airlines, same thing. Any contracts that have come due, we've just rolled them over. We really don't have enough data to say, let's renegotiate, because we don't know what we're renegotiating against. So just yesterday, somebody from finance asked me, if you would sort of do a template of what the costs are by trip, by country, as we do every year. And I said, the closest I can get is to go with 2019 figures. I can't get closer than that right now, because we don't know what they're going to be. It could be like airline costs might go up if we see a few bankruptcies. Hotel costs might go up if we see a few bankruptcies. More likely, hotel costs will go down because we don't have the volume back there yet. So, it's a crapshoot.
So again, it's a best educated guesstimate based on great unknown, right? And in so many cases, and so a final question to both of you, and then we'll open it up for any questions from our group joining us. In terms of meetings and conferences, both of your companies obviously attend them or have them for your employees. What is your thought as we sit here in late August about when you may even consider looking at either an internal conference for, let's say, Interpublic Group employees for whatever reason, or possibly attending a procurement event or global business travel event? Do you have any even rough timeframes in mind, or is it basically a true wait and see attitude? And Michael, I'll start with you on the final question.
Sure. So I would see, first of all, for internal meetings, we're going to see a lot more hybrid. Instead of having, every country in the world sort of congregate in one place and meet for a week, we may have regional meetings that we use virtual event management to bridge those in some way. And we're already looking at that fourth quarter and first quarter of next year. I would say external meetings, really, because we're in biotech, we're very much driven by what the biotech industry is doing. And for the most part, they are holding to a lot more virtual meetings well into next year. And so we will respond to that. I don't expect, certainly from our very senior management down, we expect to heavily invest in virtual management software, virtual meeting software, and be able to use that to a far greater extent than we have in the past, and to keep that going well beyond 2021.
And Fran, your thoughts on return to attending meetings?
Yeah, we're doing a lot of virtual meetings right now for the balance of this year. A lot of our meeting planners manage client pitches and things like that. So a lot of our meetings are not just straight, intercompany meetings. They're pitches, they're business pitches, and we're handling a lot of meetings for our clients as well. So that we don't see going away. I expect that will start up again next year. We've got a lot of contracts this year that we've rolled over till next year, and in anticipation of executing them then from February or March onward. We will also be doing a lot of virtual meetings that will be employees only. But I do see that when there is when this thing slows down and there is a means for someone to get the antibodies or an injection, I do see that the meetings and so on will all come back. Maybe not through 2021, but probably right after that. We do a lot of meetings and a lot of events and a lot of pitches and a lot of the stuff you just can't do virtually.
That's very true. That's very true. So great responses, Mike and Fran. Really appreciate it. And let us just stop. We're approaching 20 minutes before the hour. And Peter, just wanted to see if there are any questions coming in for Fran or Mike that they might be able to answer.
I'll give it about a minute, see if anything goes through. As of right now, there are no questions.
I hope that was because we were thorough in terms of the questions that we asked both of you. I polled my sales team over the past month to see what their customers and their prospects were saying, and these were the top questions that we got back. So
I'll just add one thing while we're waiting here, Rick, and that's that, Fran was talking about pitches. Some of the pitches that we're doing with very, very complex, intricate instruments are being done through virtual reality classes. And I don't know if that's something that we'll be able to continue past, but I think it's something that we're looking at and saying, well, if we can get right down to do a pitch and show a product in the same detail as we can when we're there in person, which is best, to send them VR glasses or to, travel from San Diego to New York for a few days. So that's the kind of that's the sort of question we're kind of coming up against.
We've had them too, Mike. I think we've been very successful at winning some business during this time through virtual pitches. I just think that as time goes on, if you're paying a client, they want to touch and feel and see you. That's just the nature of people. So, yeah. Right now they're accepting the virtual meetings because they're also virtual, because they're homebound. They can't go to an office. But I think once all of that opens up again, they feel the feeling for that is, we're paying you as a client. We want to see you in front of us. And I think that probably will be what brings you back.
Very true. Very, very true, Fran. Peter, any questions come in our final minutes together?
Yeah, we have one question here. Well, actually, the first question was whether or not that was something you'd prefer, but I think Fran actually already answered that. We have one here. Are you relying on your agency to help you with virtual meetings, or are you doing it all yourself?
I'll answer that first. Our agency does not handle any of our meetings. I've got an internal meeting planning department, and so I've got my own team working on that. So we don't use our agency for our meeting planning.
And that's the same with us. We are relying totally on our marketing teams or our internal meeting planning teams to work with our IT department actually and look at virtual meeting software and figure out which ones work for which situations.
Same here.
Yeah.
Good question. Any final questions, Peter?
Yeah, and this one is to Mike specifically. Do you see virtual meetings being the majority of your meetings in the future?
No, but I do see hybrid becoming I would say, the majority. I mean, seriously, if you think of, it's one thing to have a sales meeting, say in the US, you got to travel 3 or 4 hours. You have a global meeting, you're bringing people in, you're playing with schedules and stuff like that. I think you'll see a lot more hybrids in those situations where you're bridging sort of a combination of in-person and virtual using a combination of, conference space and virtual bridging technology.
And the global meetings are difficult because everybody's on a different time zone if they're virtual.
Any final questions, Peter, before we wrap up?
I'll give it maybe a few more seconds, see if there's any sneaky ones that poke through right at the end. I think we're good.
Well, very good. Well, Fran and Mike, truly appreciate you taking time this morning, and we had a super turnout, and we hope that those that joined the call found great benefit in their responses. I know I did, and we again thank you both for joining, for attendees to join, and please look for future communications from Peter on the continuation of the GRASP webinar series in September. So we hope all of you stay safe, stay healthy, and again, thank you for joining, and have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
Peter.
Thank you. Thanks, Fran. Thanks,
Thanks,
Peter.
Mike.